The courtroom camera captured the exact moment when arrogance met its match. Karen Westfield, a 42-year-old woman with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and a designer pantsuit that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," sat in the plaintiff's chair with smug confidence, the kind only someone who had never faced real consequences could have. Her manicured finger tapped impatiently on the armrest as she waited for Judge Judy to begin, completely unaware that the manila folder on the judge's desk held evidence so devastating it would destroy her entire case in less than 10 seconds. What followed became the most satisfying evidence reveal in courtroom television history, shared over 15 million times across social media and turning Karen Westfield from a confident plaintiff into the most hated fraud artist in America. Before diving into the spectacular downfall of the most entitled Karen ever caught on camera, make sure to smash that like button if you enjoy seeing people who think they're above the law get exactly what they deserve. Subscribe, because what Judge Judy pulls out of that folder will be the most satisfying thing you see all week. The look on Karen's face when she realizes she's been caught is absolutely priceless, and you won't want to miss a second of this epic takedown. Karen Westfield wasn't just another difficult person having a bad day. She was a professional predator who had turned filing lawsuits into a lucrative side business. Over the past 5 years, she had filed 23 separate lawsuits against small businesses in her community, always using the same playbook. She would visit a store or restaurant, create a scene, claim discrimination or poor service, and then sue for emotional distress. Most small business owners, terrified of legal fees and bad publicity, would settle quickly for a few $1,000s just to make her go away. Karen had perfected the art of being just believable enough, just sympathetic enough, and just aggressive enough to make fighting back seem more expensive than paying up. She saw herself as a genius, a woman who had figured out how to game the system and make easy money from people too afraid or too poor to challenge her lies. That morning, Karen entered Judge Judy's courtroom with the same swagger she'd carried into 23 previous legal battles. She had spent weeks preparing, not because she had a legitimate case, but because she saw an opportunity for something even better than a quiet settlement: national television exposure. She imagined going viral as the brave woman who stood up to a discriminatory baker. She pictured interview requests, social media fame, maybe even a book deal. The night before, she'd posted on Facebook that she was about to teach a TV judge a lesson and get paid for it. Her confidence was unshakable. In 23 lawsuits, she had never been caught lying. She had never faced a judge who looked beyond her tearful testimony. She had never met anyone who actually investigated her claims instead of trying to make the case disappear. Across from Karen sat Marcus Chin, a 47-year-old baker who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Marcus had immigrated to America 15 years earlier with nothing but a dream and a family recipe for the best chocolate cake anyone had ever tasted. He worked 3 jobs to save enough money to open a small bakery in a modest strip mall. For 12 years, that bakery had been his pride and joy. He employed 6 neighborhood workers, knew all his regular customers by name, and maintained a perfect 5-star rating across every review platform. The bakery was more than a business. It was his contribution to the community, his version of the American dream, and the legacy he hoped to leave for his children. All of that was threatened the moment Karen Westfield walked through his door 47 days earlier and decided he would be her next target. Marcus clutched a folder filled with financial records, security footage transcripts, and character references from dozens of loyal customers. His hands trembled slightly as he glanced at Karen, who was busy checking her makeup in a compact mirror and smiling at the cameras. He had spent $7,000 on legal fees just to make it to this courtroom, money he didn't have, money borrowed from his elderly parents who had been saving for retirement. His wife had cried every night for a month, terrified they would lose everything they'd built. His employees feared for their jobs. His children had been bullied at school after Karen's false online reviews painted their father as a racist monster. Everything Marcus had worked for hung in the balance, while Karen treated the proceedings like an audition for reality TV stardom. Judge Judy reviewed her notes one final time. Neither Karen's arrogance nor Marcus's fear could prepare them for what was about to unfold in America's most famous television courtroom. Judge Judy's voice cut through the tension like a surgical blade. "Ms. Westfield, you're suing Mr. Chin for $5,000. Tell me why you're here." It was a simple question, one Judge Judy had asked 10,000 times before. But experienced viewers knew that simplicity was deceptive. She was already studying Karen's body language, cataloging every micro-expression, every tell that separated honest plaintiffs from practiced liars. Karen, however, was too absorbed in her own performance to notice the trap being set. She took a deep theatrical breath and launched into her prepared statement with the passion of a soap opera actress. Your Honor, I have never been so humiliated and discriminated against in my entire life. On October 15th, I walked into Mr. Chin's bakery at approximately 6:30 in the evening because I wanted to buy a birthday cake for my elderly mother, who was turning 75. It was supposed to be a special day, a celebration of her life, and I wanted to surprise her with something beautiful from a local business instead of just going to a chain store. She paused for effect, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she had conveniently prepared in her jacket pocket. But the moment I walked through that door, Mr. Chin looked at me with such hatred, such pure disgust, that I immediately felt uncomfortable. I tried to ignore it and proceeded to explain what kind of cake I wanted. Something elegant and simple, nothing complicated. But he refused to help me. He claimed he was too busy, even though there were no other customers in the store. When I asked why he couldn't help me, he said, "People like you always cause problems, and I don't want your business here." The courtroom audience murmured with concern, exactly as Karen had anticipated. She was hitting every emotional note, playing the victim with practiced precision. Judge Judy's expression remained neutral, but her fingers had stopped tapping on her desk, a subtle sign that something in the story didn't sit right with her. "Continue," she said simply, giving Karen just enough rope to hang herself with. Karen's voice grew more emotional, her words coming faster as she built toward her climax. I was shocked. "Your Honor, I asked him what he meant by people like me, and he just stared at me with contempt and told me to leave his store immediately. I tried to reason with him, tried to explain that I just wanted to buy a cake for my mother's birthday, but he raised his voice and said if I didn't leave, he would call the police. I have never been treated so poorly in my entire life." The discrimination was obvious. The hatred in his eyes was unmistakable. I left that bakery in tears. I had to explain to my mother why I showed up to her birthday party without a cake, and I've suffered severe emotional distress ever since. I can't sleep at night. I have anxiety attacks every time I think about what happened. $5,000 won't undo the trauma I experienced, but it's the principle that matters. People like Mr. Chin need to learn they can't treat customers this way. Judge Judy turned her attention to Marcus, whose face had gone pale during Karen's testimony. "Mr. Chin, what's your response to these allegations?" Marcus cleared his throat nervously, his accent growing slightly thicker under stress as it always did when he was emotional. "Your Honor, none of that is true. None of it." Marcus's voice was steady but strained. "Ms. Westfield did come to my bakery on October 15th, but nothing happened the way she described. She arrived at 7:56 in the evening. My bakery closes at 8 CU. I was cleaning up, preparing to close for the night, and I had already sent my employees home. When she came in, I greeted her politely and asked how I could help. She said she wanted a custom birthday cake, something very specific with special decorations and writing. I explained that custom cakes require at least 24 hours notice because I have to prepare the decorations and make sure everything is perfect. I offered to make her cake for the next day, or showed her the pre-made cakes available for immediate purchase. But she became very angry. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. "Define very angry, Mr. Chin." Marcus swallowed hard, clearly uncomfortable recounting the experience. "She started yelling at me, saying I was lazy and incompetent. She said she knew I could make the cake right then if I wanted to, that I was just being difficult because I didn't like her. I stayed calm and professional. I explained again that custom cakes simply can't be made in 4 minutes, which was all the time I had before closing. I offered several alternatives, but she refused them all. Then she took out her phone and started recording me without my permission, walking around my bakery, filming everything, and accusing me of discrimination. I asked her to please leave because we were closed. That's when she became hostile. She said terrible things to me, about where I come from, about my accent, about immigrants taking American jobs. I have it all on my security cameras, Your Honor. Every word, every moment. Karen's confident expression flickered for just a fraction of a second, so brief that anyone not watching closely would have missed it. But Judge Judy caught it, and a knowing look crossed her face. "Ms. Westfield," Judge Judy said, "did you raise your voice in Mr. Chin's bakery?" Karen waved her hand dismissively. "I may have been upset, but that's because I was being discriminated against. Anyone would be emotional in that situation. And this ridiculous claim about security cameras, well, I didn't see any cameras. And even if they exist, they can't prove what was in his heart when he looked at me. They can't prove the discrimination I felt." Judge Judy's eyebrows lifted slightly. "So you're saying that even if there is video footage, it won't matter, because your feelings are what's important here?" Karen sat up straighter, sensing what she thought was an opportunity to drive her point home. "Exactly, Your Honor. Discrimination isn't always about what's said out loud. It's about the energy, the attitude, the way someone makes you feel. I know what I experienced, and no video can change that. Mr. Chin discriminated against me, and I have witnesses who will testify to his pattern of treating customers poorly." Judge Judy closed the file in front of her and fixed Karen, with the stare that had made grown attorneys wilt on national television. "Ms. Westfield, let me make sure I understand your position. You're telling me that regardless of what any evidence shows, regardless of what any recording might capture, you want me to rule based solely on your feelings about what happened?" Karen nodded emphatically, completely missing the trap. "Yes, Your Honor, because you can't prove what I felt. You can't prove the discrimination I experienced. You simply can't prove it." The words hung in the air like a death sentence Karen had just pronounced on herself. Judge Judy's slight smile was the last thing she saw before her world began to collapse. "Ms. Westfield," Judy said calmly, "you're absolutely right about one thing. I wasn't there on October 15th. I didn't see what happened with my own eyes." Karen's face lit up with premature victory, misreading this as validation, but Judge Judy wasn't finished. "However, before we continue, I have a simple question for you. Did you happen to notice the security cameras in Mr. Chin's bakery?" The color drained from Karen's face so quickly it was as if someone had pulled a plug and let all her confidence spill onto the courtroom floor. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. The smug expression that had carried her through the first 10 minutes of the hearing vanished completely, replaced by something that looked dangerously close to panic. I didn't see any cameras," she finally stammered, her voice losing the theatrical quality it had maintained throughout her testimony. "But that doesn't matter, because even if there are cameras, they can't show what was in his heart. They can't prove he wasn't discriminating against me." Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, and anyone who had watched her show for more than 5 minutes knew exactly what that gesture meant. She had her prey cornered, and now she was going to take her time dismantling every lie, every manipulation, every calculated word that had come out of Karen's mouth. "You're right that I can't read Mr. Chin's heart, Ms. Westfield, but I can read transcripts. I can review footage, and I can see patterns of behavior. So let me ask you again, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Is there anything about your testimony today that you would like to revise before we continue?" It was a lifeline, a final opportunity for Karen to salvage even a shred of dignity by admitting she had exaggerated or misremembered. But Karen Westfield had spent 5 years lying successfully to judges, lawyers, and business owners. She had never been caught before, never been challenged with actual evidence, never faced someone who bothered to investigate beyond her tears and accusations. Her arrogance was too deeply ingrained to recognize the cliff edge she was standing on. "No, Your Honor," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "I stand by every word I said. Mr. Chin discriminated against me, and nothing he shows you can prove otherwise. You simply can't prove what happened." Even Marcus, who had been slumped in his chair expecting the worst, sat up slightly straighter, sensing that something fundamental had shifted in the courtroom atmosphere. "Ms. Westfield," Judge Judy said slowly, savoring each word, "you've used that phrase twice now, and you can't prove it. You're betting everything on the idea that without perfect evidence, your word carries equal weight to Mr. Chen's, and that your tears and your performance will be enough to win. Is that a fair assessment of your strategy?" Karen nodded eagerly, still not realizing she was being led into a trap. "Yes, exactly. It's his word against mine, and I'm the one who was victimized. I'm the one who suffered. My feelings and my experience should matter more than whatever convenient story he's prepared." She crossed her arms across her chest and the universal gesture of someone convinced they've made an unassailable point. The audience exchanged looks that ranged from disbelief to anticipation. They could sense what was coming, even if Karen remained oblivious. Judge Judy reached for the manila folder that had been sitting on her desk throughout the entire proceeding. It was thick, bulging with documents, and as she opened it slowly and deliberately, the rustling of paper was the only sound in the silent courtroom. "Ms. Westfield, I want to thank you for being so confident in your position," Judge Judy said. "It's going to make what happens next so much more satisfying." She pulled out the first document, holding it up so the cameras could capture it clearly. "This is a transcript from the security footage of Mr. Chen's bakery on October 15th. Mr. Chen doesn't just have cameras, Ms. Westfield. He has cameras with audio recording. High-definition audio that captured every single word spoken in his bakery that evening." Karen's face went from pale to completely ashen. Her hands, which had been resting confidently on the armrests, began to tremble visibly. That's an invasion of privacy," she managed to whisper, her voice cracking. "He can't just record people without their knowledge." Judge Judy's expression hardened. "Actually, Ms. Westfield, in this state, business owners are absolutely permitted to have security cameras with audio in their establishments. There are signs posted at the entrance of Mr. Chen's bakery informing customers that security systems are in operation. But let's not get distracted by your sudden concern about privacy laws. Let's talk about what these recordings show." Judge Judy began reading from the transcript, her voice clear and precise. "October 15th, 7:56 p.m. A customer enters the bakery. Mr. Chen greets the customer. 'Good evening. Welcome to Chen's Bakery. How can I help you tonight?' The customer responds, 'I need a birthday cake right now.' Mr. Chen replies, 'I'd be happy to help you. We have several beautiful cakes already prepared, or I can take an order for a custom cake for tomorrow.' The customer raises her voice. 'I don't want tomorrow. I want it now. What kind of bakery can't make a simple cake?' Judge Judy looked up from the transcript. 'Does this sound familiar, Ms. Westfield?' Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked desperately at the audience as if seeking support, but found only expressions of shock and disgust. That's out of context," she finally managed. "You're not reading it with the right tone." He was being condescending. Judge Judy held up her hand. "I'm not finished. Let me continue reading what you said next, Ms. Westfield. And I warn you, the language gets quite ugly." Judge Judy's smile grew wider, and the audience collectively held its breath. The judge's voice took on a harder edge as she read Karen's actual words from that evening. "You people come to this country and think you can treat Americans like garbage. You probably don't even have a real license to run this business. Go back to where you came from and stop taking jobs from real Americans." The courtroom erupted in gasps. Several audience members shook their heads in disgust. Marcus sat with his head bowed, reliving the humiliation he had felt that evening. Karen's friend, who had been sitting in the gallery, quietly gathered her purse and began edging toward the exit. "Your Honor, I was upset," Karen tried to explain, her voice now high-pitched and desperate. "I didn't mean those things. I was just frustrated. You can't use my words against me like that." Judge Judy's expression could have frozen fire. "I absolutely can use your words against you, Ms. Westfield. These are your words, captured clearly on audio, showing that you were the one who was hostile, discriminatory, and abusive. But we're not done yet. Not even close." She pulled out another document from the folder. "This is something I find particularly interesting, Ms. Westfield. After you left Mr. Chen's bakery that night, you went home and posted on your Facebook page. Do you remember what you posted?" Karen's eyes went wide with recognition and horror. She began shaking her head frantically. No, you can't bring my social media into this. That's private." Judge Judy's laugh was cold and merciless. "You posted it publicly, Ms. Westfield. Publicly, where anyone in the world could read it. Let me share what you wrote with everyone here." Judge Judy adjusted her glasses and read from the printout. "Posted at 9:47 p.m. on October 15th. Found another target. The Asian bakery owner probably won't even fight back. Going to make this one pay big. These immigrants are so easy because they're scared of lawyers. I'll have a check by next week." The courtroom exploded in chaos. Audience members were shouting. Marcus looked up with tears streaming down his face, finally realizing that someone believed him. Karen was desperately trying to speak over the noise. "That was a joke. I was joking with my friends. You can't take that seriously." Judge Judy slammed her hand on the desk, demanding silence. A joke, Miss Westfield? Let me show you what else I found. She pulled out a thick stack of papers. These are records of 23 lawsuits you filed against small businesses in the past 5 years. 23. And would you like to know what I discovered when I reviewed all 23 cases? Karen was now openly crying, mascara running down her cheeks in dark streaks. This isn't fair. You're not supposed to investigate like this. 17 of these 23 businesses were owned by immigrants or minorities, Judge Judy continued, her voice like steel. 17. You have a pattern, Ms. Westfield. You deliberately target vulnerable business owners. You create confrontations. You file lawsuits and then you collect settlement checks when these frightened people decide it's easier to pay you than to fight. You're not a victim, Ms. Westfield. You're a predator. Karen Westfield was no longer the confident woman who had strutted into the courtroom an hour earlier. She sat hunched in her chair, her designer outfit now looking like a costume she had no right to wear. Her carefully applied makeup streaked across her face in muddy rivers of mascara and foundation. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she gripped the edge of the plaintiff's table, and her voice came out in broken gasps between sobs. Please, Your Honor, I can explain all of this. You don't understand. Those other cases are completely different. This is about what Mr. Chen did to me, not about anything else. But Judge Judy was far from finished dismantling the lies that had sustained Karen's fraud operation for 5 years. Oh, but those other cases are entirely relevant, Ms. Westfield, Judge Judy said, pulling out yet another document from her seemingly bottomless folder of evidence. Let me tell you what else I discovered when I actually bothered to investigate your claims. Something that apparently none of the other judges or business owners took the time to do. You mentioned witnesses, didn't you? People who would corroborate your story about Mr. Chen's terrible behavior. Karen nodded weakly, hope flickering briefly in her eyes at the possibility of salvation. Yes, I have witnesses. They saw everything. Judge Judy's expression could have withered plants. I contacted your witnesses, Ms. Westfield, both of them. Would you like to know what they told me? Karen's face went from red and blotchy to completely white. They told you what happened. They saw Mr. Chen discriminate against me. Judge Judy shook her head slowly, savoring the moment. Actually, Ms. Westfield, they told me something quite different. They told me that you paid them $50 each to come to court and lie on your behalf. $50. That's what you valued perjury at. She let that hang in the air before continuing. But here's where your plan really fell apart. One of your witnesses, a woman named Sandra Martinez, felt so guilty about what you asked her to do that she came forward with text messages. Messages where you explicitly told her exactly what to say, exactly how to act, and exactly what lies to tell in this courtroom. The audience gasped collectively, and several people actually stood up to get a better look at Karen's face. As the revelation landed, Karen tried to speak but only managed to produce a strangled, choking sound. Her lawyer, a young man who looked like he desperately wished he had called in sick that morning, sat with his head in his hands. Judge Judy pulled out a stack of printed text, messages, and began reading them. Aloud. October 20th. Judge Judy read aloud. You texted Sandra. Remember, you need to say you saw the baker being rude to me. Say he raised his voice and looked angry. Make it sound racist, but don't use that word exactly. Cry if you can. I'll give you $50 cash after court. Judge Judy looked up from the messages. Would you like me to continue, Ms. Westfield, or have you heard enough? Karen was now sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. I'm sorry, she wailed, her voice echoing through the silent courtroom. I'm so sorry. I made mistakes. I was desperate for money. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Judge Judy's voice cut through Karen's tears like a knife through butter. You didn't mean to hurt anyone, Ms. Westfield? Let me tell you about the people you did hurt. Let me tell you about the real consequences of your actions. She gestured toward Marcus, who sat quietly in the defendant's chair, tears of relief finally streaming down his face. Mr. Chen has spent $7,000 in legal fees fighting your fraudulent lawsuit, money he borrowed from his elderly parents, who had been saving it for their retirement. His business has suffered because you left fake one-star reviews across every platform you could find, calling him a racist and warning people to stay away. His children have been bullied at school because other kids heard their parents talking about the racist baker. His wife has developed stress-related health problems. His employees have been worried about losing their jobs. You didn't just file a frivolous lawsuit. Ms. Westfield, you tried to destroy an innocent man's entire life because you saw him as an easy target. The weight of Judge Judy's words seemed to physically crush Karen further into her chair. And it's not just Mr. Chen. Judge Judy continued relentlessly. I looked into some of your other victims. A Korean dry cleaner who paid you $3,000 to settle because he couldn't afford a prolonged legal battle and didn't speak English well enough to defend himself confidently. A Mexican restaurant owner who paid you $2,500 after you claimed you found a hair in your food, even though the security footage I subpoenaed showed you pulling a hair from your own head and placing it on your plate. An Indian grocery store owner who paid you $2,000 after you claimed you slipped on a wet floor, even though footage clearly shows it was completely dry. Should I continue? Or are you beginning to understand the scope of your criminal behavior? Karen could no longer even attempt to defend herself. She sat defeated, broken, her entire fraud exposed under the harsh lights of national television. Every lie she had told, every person she had manipulated, every dollar she had extorted through fear and intimidation was now part of the public record. Judge Judy leaned forward, her final words carrying the weight of absolute authority. Ms. Westfield, you walked into my courtroom thinking you could run the same con you've been running for 5 years. You thought I would be just another judge who took your tears at face value. You thought Mr. Chen would be just another frightened immigrant who would rather pay you than fight back. You were wrong on every count, and now you're going to face the consequences you've been avoiding for far too long. Judge Judy straightened the papers in front of her with deliberate precision, each movement calculated to extend Karen's agony for just a few more seconds. The courtroom was so silent that the sound of paper sliding across the desk echoed like thunder. Every eye was fixed on Judge Judy's face, waiting for the verdict everyone knew was coming, but desperately wanted to hear spoken aloud. Karen had stopped crying, not because she had regained her composure, but because she had simply run out of tears. She sat motionless, staring at her hands, looking like someone who had just watched their entire world burn to ashes in front of them. Ms. Westfield, Judge Judy began, her voice carrying the full weight of her authority and decades of experience. In 25 years of presiding over cases, I have seen every type of scammer, every variety of con artist, and every breed of person who thinks they can manipulate the legal system for personal gain. But you, Ms. Westfield, you represent something particularly despicable. You don't just lie for money. You deliberately target the most vulnerable members of our society. You seek out immigrants, people who are already navigating a complex system in a language that isn't their first, people who are terrified of legal proceedings, and you exploit their fear for profit. You are not a victim, Ms. Westfield. You are a predator in every sense of the word. Judge Judy paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. Your lawsuit against Mr. Chen is dismissed immediately and with prejudice, which means you can never file this claim again. But dismissing your fraudulent case isn't nearly enough justice for what you've done. Mr. Chen, she said, turning toward him, how much did you spend in legal fees preparing to defend yourself against Ms. Westfield's lies? Marcus cleared his throat, his voice still shaky with emotion. $7,000, Your Honor. Money I borrowed from my parents, Marcus added quietly. Judge Judy nodded firmly. Ms. Westfield, you are hereby ordered to pay Mr. Chen $7,000 in legal fees. Additionally, for the emotional distress you caused him, for the damage to his business reputation, and for the harm you inflicted on his family, you will pay an additional $5,000 in compensatory damages. Karen's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. Your Honor, I don't have that kind of money. I can't pay $12,000. That's not fair. The irony of Karen Westfield, who had extorted thousands of dollars from vulnerable business owners, now claiming that justice wasn't fair, was not lost on anyone in the courtroom. Judge Judy's expression remained cold and unmoved. Not fair, Ms. Westfield. You know what isn't fair? Targeting hard-working immigrants because you think they're easy marks. You know what isn't fair? Destroying someone's reputation and livelihood based on lies. You know what isn't fair? Using the legal system as a weapon to terrorize innocent people. You will find a way to pay Mr. Chen every single penny, even if you have to sell everything you own to do it. But Judge Judy still wasn't finished. Furthermore, Ms. Westfield, I am awarding Mr. Chen an additional $3,000 in punitive damages. That brings your total obligation to $15,000. And before you even think about claiming bankruptcy or trying to avoid payment, I want you to know that I am personally forwarding all of this evidence to the district attorney's office. The fraud you committed, the witness tampering, the conspiracy, the pattern of targeting vulnerable populations, these are serious criminal matters. You may very well be facing criminal charges that could result in significant prison time. The color drained from Karen's face so completely that she looked like a ghost. Prison? She whispered, the word barely audible. You can't send me to prison. I have a family. I have a life. Judge Judy's voice was ice. You should have thought about that before you decided to make a career out of destroying other people's families and lives. Mr. Chen's American dream nearly died because of you. His children were traumatized because of you. His elderly parents lost their retirement savings because of you. Did you think about your family when you were sending those text messages coaching witnesses to commit perjury? Did you think about your life when you were posting on social media about targeting immigrant business owners? Judge Judy gathered all the documents and placed them back into the folder. This evidence package will be in the hands of the district attorney by tomorrow morning. I strongly suggest you hire a criminal defense attorney, Ms. Westfield, because you're going to need one. And I suggest you start figuring out how to make restitution, not just to Mr. Chen, but to all the other victims you've defrauded over the past 5 years. This courtroom is adjourned. The sound of Judge Judy's gavel hitting the bench was like a gunshot, final and absolute. Karen Westfield sat frozen in her chair as if the weight of her consequences had physically pinned her in place. Security had to help her to her feet and escort her from the courtroom because her legs were shaking so badly she could barely walk. As she stumbled toward the exit, the audience members didn't even try to hide their disgust. Some shook their heads, others whispered to each other, and a few actually applauded as she passed. The friend who had come with her for moral support had long since disappeared, apparently deciding that being associated with Karen Westfield was no longer in her best interest. In the hallway, with cameras still rolling, Karen collapsed against the wall, sobbing hysterically while security officers stood nearby to ensure she didn't cause a scene. The confident woman who had walked in expecting an easy victory and national attention had gotten the attention she wanted, just not in any way she could have imagined. Meanwhile, back in the courtroom, Marcus Chen was surrounded by supporters. Audience members came up to shake his hand, tell him how brave he was for fighting back, and express their disgust at what Karen had put him through. Judge Judy, in a rare moment of warmth, came down from her bench to speak with Marcus privately. Mr. Chen, she said, her voice gentler than it had been all day. You did the right thing by standing up to her. You may have saved a dozen other business owners from becoming her next victims. I hope you can rebuild and move forward from this. Marcus bowed respectfully, tears streaming down his face. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for taking the time to find the truth. The aftermath of Karen Westfield's destruction unfolded with the kind of viral velocity that only social media can generate. Within 2 hours of the episode airing, clips of Karen confidently declaring, "You can't prove it," followed immediately by Judge Judy pulling out the evidence, had been shared across every platform. The hashtag, #YouCan'tProveIt, began trending worldwide, with millions of people using it to call out liars and fraudsters in their own lives. Karen's face became a meme template, her expression, of shock and horror when the security footage transcripts were revealed, turned into countless variations captioned with phrases like, "When you lie on your resume and they actually check in that moment when the receipts come out," but real-world consequences extended far beyond internet jokes. The district attorney's office, true to Judge Judy's promise, opened a full criminal investigation into Karen's activities. Within a week, they had contacted all 23 businesses she had sued over the past 5 years. 12 of those businesses decided to press charges. 5 others joined together to file a class action lawsuit seeking restitution for the money they had paid in fraudulent settlements. Karen's husband, a man who claimed he had no idea what his wife had been doing, filed for divorce and released a public statement condemning her actions and expressing sympathy for her victims. Karen Westfield's local newspaper ran a front-page story about her fraud scheme, complete with interviews from some of her victims. The Korean dry cleaner spoke about the shame and fear he had felt, paying money he couldn't afford to someone who was lying about him. The Mexican restaurant owner described how Karen's false claims had nearly destroyed his business and his reputation in the community. Each story painted a picture of Karen, not as a one-time offender but as a calculated predator who had refined her technique over years of practice. Her social media accounts, which she desperately tried to delete, were archived by internet users who made sure every post, every brag about her schemes, every bit of evidence of her fraud remained accessible. As for Marcus Chen, the baker who had nearly lost everything, his story had a much happier ending. The publicity from the case brought hundreds of new customers to his bakery. People lined up around the block to buy his cakes, shake his hand, and tell him they were proud of him for fighting back. A local news station did a feature on his business, highlighting his journey as an immigrant entrepreneur and the quality of his baked goods. Within a month, he had earned enough to pay back his parents and hire 2 additional employees to handle the increased business. The community that Karen had tried to turn against him had instead rallied around him, proving that sometimes justice doesn't just punish the guilty, it rewards the innocent. The lesson from Karen Westfield's spectacular downfall was crystal clear and resonated far beyond that single courtroom. For everyone watching, whether in the live audience or among the millions who saw the clips online, the message was unmistakable. Arrogance has a price, lies have consequences, and somewhere out there, someone like Judge Judy exists who will take the time to find the truth. Karen had walked into that courtroom believing she had perfected the art of manipulation, that her tears and her performance would carry the day just as they had 23 times before. But she had made one fatal miscalculation. She had assumed that everyone would take her word at face value. She had forgotten that some people actually care about evidence, about justice, and about protecting the vulnerable from predators like her. If you loved watching Karen Westfield get absolutely destroyed by the power of evidence and real justice, smash that like button right now. Drop a comment below telling me what you think should happen to people who file fraudulent lawsuits, and whether you think Karen's punishment was harsh enough or if she deserved even more. Make sure you're subscribed because next week we have another incredible Judge Judy moment, where an entitled defendant learns the hard way that lying under oath has serious consequences. Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that the truth always comes out eventually. And that telling Judge Judy, you can't prove it, is basically asking her to prove it in the most devastating way possible. Remember, in Judge Judy's courtroom, justice isn't just blind. It's thorough. It's evidence-based, and it always catches up with people who think they're too clever to get caught. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, where another Karen gets exactly what she deserves.